Welcome to my tasty art expedition, everyone. I'm Artifacts. There are tons of ways to shade a drawing, but how do you know which technique to use? Well, I'm here to show you my top 8 shading techniques and where I typically use them in my art. So subscribe right now before you forget, because you want all of your art questions in the future answered, right? Okay, let's get to it. The first and probably most popular shading technique is known as hatching. It's where you draw short lines in the same direction to shade your object. You can get darker areas by drawing more lines or by changing your pencil pressure. To get more texture and even darker shades, you can use this second shading technique known as cross-hatching. This is where you draw over your initial set of hatch marks with more lines, but change the angle of the lines so they now cross over. Continuing to change the angles of each set of new lines will give you the darkest possible shades. The third technique I use is contour shading. The short lines in this technique make it similar to hatching, but here you follow the curves of the shape. In fact, many artists prefer this method over hatching because it gives your objects more volume. Like cross-hatching, you can also draw lines in multiple directions, but you should still try to follow the natural curves of the object. This is called cross-contour shading. When I want my drawing to have depth, as you'll see in my How to Draw Realistic Lips video, I use contour shading. Using this technique for the creases in the lips really helps make them pop out from the page. When I ink illustrations, I find a combination of all three techniques, hatching, cross-hatching, and contour shading, to be the best. They allow me to give my drawings depth without making them messy, since ink pens are bold and less forgiving. The fifth shading technique is called blending or smudging. This is where you do light shading with graphite or charcoal and then rub it into your paper using a tool to blend or smudge those markings. A blending stump, which is tightly rolled paper that's formed into a point, will give you the most control over where you smudge. A finger makes a good smudge tool too, but it's best for larger surface areas, and the oils in your finger will diffuse the markings more. If you don't have a blending stump but you still want finer control, a Q-tip makes a great alternative. Finally, you can use a cloth or tissue if blending with your finger, which will help keep your hands clean. I've used blending or smudging as a shading technique since I started drawing as a kid because it helped me get smooth skin gradations when drawing portraits. I always use a combination of my finger and a blending stump, and I find a rougher paper with some tooth makes skin tones more realistic when I smudge, since skin isn't perfectly smooth. An extra benefit of a tool like a blending stump is that it holds some graphite on its surface, where I can then use the stump like a pencil to add light shading to blank areas of the paper. The sixth shading technique I use is known as stippling. This simple approach to shading is the most time-consuming because you use nothing but dots to shade your object, and larger artwork can take a long time to cover. To make an area darker, you just add more dots. This technique is great to add texture to your art, so I use this for things that naturally have a lot of texture, like these bushy letters in my How to Draw Cool Letters video. Here, I use it to make this emoji's tongue surface more naturally rough. Usually I use stippling to complement other shading techniques, but it can be a fun art project to use by itself. Circulism is the seventh shading technique, and as the name suggests, it's where you shade using many small overlapping circles. To vary the lights and darks, you simply adjust how much pressure you use. Scumbling is my eighth and final shading technique, and I consider it a close cousin to circulism. It uses small circles, but they're more random. This can give it a slightly rougher look than what you'll end up with when using circulism's controlled circles in the same direction. Either way, both are really good to use for things like skin texture. I also use both a lot when trying to get deeper solid colors while drawing with colored pencils, because the smaller circular movements help fill in all of the little grooves in a paper's tooth. Well, hopefully I gave you some useful information today. If so, please give this video a like, and hit me with your other art questions in the comments. Catch you next time.